The FBI released video of someone armed appearing to tamper with the front door camera. The video shows the person trying to cover the camera, finding leaves and using them to cover the lens. FBI Director Kash Patel says investigators got the video from back-end systems. An FBI official said on X the agency released the video within hours of receiving it, hoping someone would help identify the individual. The White House says President Donald Trump watched the new surveillance footage.
His initial reaction, of course, as all Americans, is just pure disgust.
Before the release of the new video, Elena Guthrie posted this on Instagram.
We are at an hour of desperation, and we need your help.
The FBI is offering a $50,000 reward for any information that leads to the recovery of Nancy Guthrie and any information that leads to the arrest and conviction of anybody connected to her kidnapping. The FBI says Nancy Guthrie has trouble walking, she wears a pacemaker, and she takes medication for her heart.
Well, we found DNA and we eliminated some people, yes. And yes, it's significant when we find somebody that certainly matches that for sure. But right now, there's a lot of significant leads we're working. I think that video was very key to us, and we're tracking down some things there too. So we as of what's today? It's Friday. So as of Wednesday, we had over 18,000 leads here. The FBI had some 15,000 leads there. We put that video out, and in less than a couple hours, we had almost another 5,000 leads.
Wow.
We're probably close to 50,000 today. But we want those leads. We need those leads. We need people to keep calling us and sending us things, and because that's what's going to solve this case. So yes, it's definitely a kidnapping. As for a homicide, we are working under the belief that she's still out there somewhere. The family believes that. I believe that. Why would we think otherwise? There's people say, well, there's no proof of life. Well, there's no proof of death either. Sometimes hope is all we've got. I will say this. I don't believe you eliminate anybody ever, because take the gentleman in Rio Rico where we went and did a search warrant.
Right.
We talked to him. We felt comfortable with what he said. We checked into his story, and we felt like, okay, maybe there's not. But you don't know that, because what if the stuff we sent to the lab comes back and says, hey, you have Nancy's DNA here. So you can't really ever eliminate anybody. What we do is we chase that lead down to an end and go, is this it? Are we satisfied? As for the family, and this is really key to me, and the media and those on social media need to understand this.
The mist hung low over the Tuscan hillside, swallowing the rows of Sangiovese grapes that had been the pride of the Cioni estate for generations. But on the morning of July 14th, the usual hum of the harvest was replaced by a chilling, hollow silence. Nancy Guthrie, an American expatriate who had moved to Italy to find peace after a high-profile career in investigative law, was found dead in the cellar of her rented villa. The scene was as gruesome as it was calculated. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, just the cold remains of a woman who had known too many secrets. Local authorities were quick to point toward a botched robbery, but the community knew better. There was a shadow lurking behind the cypress trees, and his name was Tommaso Cioni. Tommaso, a man of wealth and fatting influence, had been seen arguing with Nancy at a local trattoria only 48 hours prior. Witnesses described his face as a mask of controlled rage. As the sole heir to the surrounding lands, his power in the region was absolute, or so he thought. The investigation went cold almost as quickly as it began. Evidence disappeared from the local precinct, and witnesses suddenly suffered from convenient bouts of amnesia. It seemed Nancy Guthrie would become just another unsolved file in the dusty archives of the Carabinieri. That was until an outsider arrived with a camera, a digital recorder, and a relentless obsession with the truth. Like in Subscribe to True, achieves true crime to follow this journey into the heart of a Tuscan nightmare. We are just scratching the surface of a web of lies that spans 2 continents. Enter Elena Vance, an investigative journalist whose reputation for breaking unbreakable cases preceded her. Elena hadn't come to Italy for the wine or the sunsets. She had come because Nancy Guthrie had been her mentor, the woman who taught her that a story isn't over until the last ghost is laid to rest. Stepping off the train in the quiet village of Montepulciano, Elena felt the weight of 1,000 watchful eyes. In a town this small, a stranger asking questions is louder than a gunshot. Her first stop wasn't the police station. It was the estate of Tommaso Cioni. The iron gates of the Cioni villa stood like sentinels, rusted but imposing. When Tommaso finally appeared, draped in linen and smelling of expensive tobacco, he didn't look like a murderer. He looked like a man bored by the world. But Elena noticed the way his hands tightened around the silver handle of his cane when she mentioned Nancy's name. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of genuine fear masked by aristocratic disdain. "Mr. Cioni," Elena began, her voice steady despite the adrenaline, "people say you were the last person to see Nancy alive. They also say the police stopped looking because you told them to." Tommaso's smile didn't reach his eyes. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, claiming Nancy was a dear, troubled friend who had simply gotten mixed up with the wrong elements of the local underworld. But Elena had found a ledger in Nancy's belongings, a list of offshore accounts tied directly to the Cioni vineyard. The motive wasn't passion, it was preservation. Like and subscribe to True achieves true crime, as we dig deeper into the financial ruins that Tommaso Cioni was desperate to hide. The Italian authorities had officially closed the case, citing a lack of physical evidence linking any specific individual to the crime. But Elena Vance knew that in a rush to bury a scandal, the cleanup is rarely perfect. Armed with a high-intensity UV light and a tip from a disgruntled former groundskeeper, Elena slipped back onto the Cioni estate under the cover of a moonless Tuscan night. Her target wasn't the villa itself, but the secondary fermentation room, a place Tommaso claimed had been locked for renovations during the week of the murder. As the purple light washed over the limestone floors, the room transformed. Scrubbed clean to the naked eye, the floorboards screamed under the ultraviolet glow. Large, swiped patterns of protein signatures appeared, telltale signs of a massive cleanup operation. But it was the corner near the heavy oak aging barrels that stopped Elena's breath. A single, dark splatter had bypassed the mop, seeping into a hairline fracture in the stone. Using a specialized collection kit, Elena took a sample of the residue. If this was Nancy's blood, the botched robbery theory would disintegrate. Robbers don't kill in a locked fermentation room and then spend hours bleaching the stone. They take the jewelry and run. This was an execution carried out in a private sanctuary. As she retreated into the shadows, the headlights of a black sedan crested the hill, sweeping across the vineyard. Tommaso wasn't sleeping. He was patrolling his borders. The journalist realized then that she wasn't just investigating a cold case. She was being hunted by a man with everything to lose. Like and subscribe to True achieves true crime to see if the lab results confirm Elena's darkest suspicions about the Cioni legacy. The lab results from the unauthorized swab arrived via an encrypted link 3 days later. The DNA profile was a perfect match for Nancy Guthrie, but there was a secondary profile mixed into the sample, a partial genomic sequence that suggested a familial link to the Cioni bloodline. It wasn't just Nancy's blood on that floor. It was the DNA of her killer, left behind in a moment of frantic struggle. Elena Vance sat in her darkened hotel room, the glow of the laptop illuminating her grim expression. The science was irrefutable, but in a region where the Cioni name was synonymous with the law, DNA was just data until a witness dared to speak. That witness appeared in the form of Gianna, a woman who had served the Cioni family for 40 years. Met in the shadowed corner of a crumbling cathedral, Gianna's voice was a tremulous rasp. "He didn't just kill her for the money," she whispered, clutching a rosary. "He killed her because she found the letters." According to Gianna, Nancy had discovered that Tommaso wasn't just laundering money. He was systematically stripping the estate's heritage to pay off debts to a Milanese syndicate. Nancy had threatened to go to the Italian press, an act that would have stripped Tommaso of his title and his freedom. Gianna handed Elena a small, rusted key. It's for the private archives in the cellar. The real records are there. If you go alone. He knows you're talking to me. The stakes had shifted from a cold case to a hot pursuit. Elena realized she wasn't just a journalist anymore. She was the only thing standing between a murderer and his total exoneration. The air in the Cioni estate's deepest cellar was thick with the scent of damp earth and fermenting grapes, a cloying sweetness that felt like a shroud. Elena Vance moved with practiced silence, the rusted key Gianna had provided heavy in her pocket. Every creak of the floorboards above sounded like a heartbeat. She knew Tommaso was likely only a few dozen yards away, perhaps sipping a vintage while he calculated his next move to silence the American nuisance. When the key finally turned in the lock of the heavy iron-bound door, the screech of metal on metal felt deafening. Inside the private archives, the temperature dropped significantly. This wasn't a wine cellar. It was a tomb for secrets. Rows of leather-bound ledgers stretched into the darkness, documenting a century of Cioni history. Elena bypassed the older records, her flashlight beam dancing across the shelves until it landed on a folder marked with Nancy Guthrie's initials. Inside, the truth was laid bare in frantic, handwritten notes. Nancy hadn't just found financial discrepancies. She had discovered a shadow harvest. Tommaso had been cutting his premium wines with cheap, industrial-grade ethanol and synthetic colorants to fulfill a massive contract with a Milanese crime syndicate. It was a fraud that would not only bankrupt the estate, but destroy the reputation of the entire region's viticulture. Nancy's last entry was dated the night of her death. "He knows I have the batch numbers. He's coming to the villa. I've hidden the flash drive in the—" The sentence ended in a jagged ink smear. A heavy footfall echoed from the stairs behind her. The beam of a second flashlight cut through the gloom, pinning Elena against the shelves. "You have your story, Miss Vance," a cold, aristocratic voice whispered. "It's a pity you won't live to publish the final draft." The silhouette at the top of the stone stairs was unmistakable. Tommaso Cioni stood with the casual posture of a man who owned the very air Elena was breathing. The light from his heavy flashlight didn't just illuminate the cellar. It felt like a physical weight against her chest. "Nancy was always too curious for her own good," Tommaso remarked, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "She thought she was saving the soul of Tuscany. She didn't realize that in this valley, the soul is bought and sold every harvest." Elena clutched the ledger to her chest, her mind racing through the layout of the subterranean tunnels. She knew these ancient villas often had escape routes, ventilation shafts, or old service paths used during the wars. As Tommaso began a slow, deliberate descent, the rhythmic thump-thump of his cane on the stone steps sounded like a countdown. He wasn't in a hurry. He knew every exit was bolted from the outside. Or so he thought. "You can't bury the DNA, Tommaso," Elena shouted, her voice trembling but defiant. "The lab has the results. If I don't check in by morning, the files go live to the international press." Tommaso paused, a flicker of genuine malice crossing his refined features. "In Italy, Ms. Vance, files can be deleted. People, however, are simply recycled into the earth." With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Elena kicked over a heavy rack of aging bottles. The glass shattered in a deafening explosion of vinegar and sediment, creating a slick, jagged barrier. In the momentary confusion, she dove behind a massive oak tun, spotting a low wooden hatch partially hidden by a rotted tapestry. It was a coal chute, narrow and filthy, but it was her only way out of the tomb. Like and subscribe to True Achieves True Crime,